And the goal here for the Lunch and Learn is to take some of the questions that we've been getting from all of you and try and answer them all in one place. Obviously, we can't give you everything, but we're hoping that some of the tools that we can share today will be useful. And then we'll leave some time at the end to answer any other questions that you might have that we didn't cover. The other thing you should know is we'll keep the chat going. Erin's going to keep an eye on it. And if there's something that the speakers can respond to in real time, we'll do our best to do that. So I'm going to turn it over to Maura. We know that you're all busy, so we're going to try and do a lot in a very short time. So we're going to start with Maura.
Oh, sorry, Maura, you're muted, so not hearing you. Still muted. I want to make sure we unmute your phone, but I think what you might be saying is that we were planning on starting with remote work management and with Mr. Wayne over here. So let's see, Wayne, are you able to talk?
Yes, can you hear me?
Awesome, yeah, sounds good. You want to kick things off?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm grateful for this opportunity, which I have to talk with y'all. My background, I've been an HR practitioner for over 30 years. Currently, I'm working for a Professional Human Resources Association on their staff as a chapter engagement manager. And I'm excited about the subject that they gave me to talk about. A lot of the tools and resources that I'm not reinventing the wheel, but they're already out there for you. And one of the tools that I'll be taking information from is actually right from the website, the CNN website. So if you look at the top of the website, I know Erin will go over this later, and basically click on the COVID resources link and it'll take it to the stuff that I'm talking about so you can review it later. Way too much information to talk about in the short time that we have. So anyway, to get started off, the biggest thing I've seen and the concerns I've had has been over one simple thing, and that's communication. A lot of people have been telecommuting for a long time, but this is a whole new environment for everybody. There's different ways to communicate. What I found out the best thing to do is to check out your technology first. Some people may not be set up for remote working or telecommuting, however you want to call it. So I suggest test your technology. Sometimes what I've been seeing people experiencing is their internet not be as good as it used to be because of the high volume that is being used now. So confirm that with your provider to make sure that you have the best internet connection that you need to have, because it's more viable to have that communication. And I think there's different ways to communicate, especially when you're a team leader. Always set a regular scheduled time, whether it be once a day, once a week, or whatever, to make sure you communicate with your staff. For example, with my team that I work with Pyra, we have a Monday staff meeting, but we find out that that's not enough sometimes because of the telecommuting. And we use a platform like we're using now. We use Zoom. And sometimes we use it for business purposes, and sometimes we use it just to check in. For example, one morning, randomly on a Thursday morning, our director said, okay, everybody check in at 9:15, but we can't talk about any business. How's this affecting you? How's it going? How's everybody doing? And what stemmed from that communication is the executive director sent out an email to the staff. And I'm not going to read the whole email, but kind of the content and bullet points, I think it's important for all of us as team leaders to discuss. Whatever IM platform you're using, we use Teams, Microsoft Teams. Make sure you set your silent times or quiet times, as it's called, whatever it may be. For example, 5:30 p.m. to 8:30 a.m. It's very tempting, especially when working remotely, to check your IMs frequently, but you need to turn it off. And I found out it's hard. I'm taking the first few days were not very easy for me, but I found out as I did that, I was more productive the next day. And then quiet days. A lot of times, unless it's an urgent matter, Saturday and Sundays, or whatever your work may be, set those quiet days. Obviously, you're spending a lot of time with your family now for the obvious reason. But more important, you can spend that quality time with them by setting those quiet times and being able to disconnect from the everyday work week. Now, this has to do with non-exempt people that are hourly employees that work for them. Sometimes, obviously, most of you may have like some type of timekeeping system that's available to you. Use that, but also emphasize with your hourly employees that they need to take their breaks, they need to take their lunch periods, and so on. Even more critical, obviously, you can monitor it via the timekeeping system, but more important, sometimes they take that half-hour break or hour break, they don't take those smaller breaks. And what we have done sometimes is we've kind of using Microsoft Teams saying, hey guys, you take a break yet? You know, just to remind them that sometimes you need to get away from that period of time so you can be more productive. But also have a method for checking in. Now, there's different ways to check in. It could be via Microsoft Teams, could be via even phone calls. They're okay too, depending on what technology you have, whether it's FaceTime or texting or whatever. We found that successful as long as they're reaching out and communicating, and there's some type of response behind that. Especially if you're a team leader and you have concerns about one of your team members, is that if you're not communicating, feel free to call them. You know, it's okay to use the regular technology to make sure everything is going okay. Also, what we instructed our staff to do is the focus. A lot of times especially with a laptop, it's easy to go from room to room to room to room to set up where you want to set up to work. We recommend that you set up a consistent space for yourself and your team members to work from. My wife's a school teacher. She's at home every day now. Sometimes we have to fight for the computer because she has to communicate with her students. So that's when I go to my laptop. But most times, you know, it's the flexibility is there. So set up a designed work area, so that'll be helpful for you. And make sure you block out personal time for yourself during the workday. And that goes back to the break times that I mentioned earlier. And always use technology to your best advantage. What I found out is that if I took advantage of technology, and I'm not being a baby boomer, I'm not the best on technology, but I have children who help me with the technology. I go, it's just the way to go. It's just what I need to do. And it's been very, very helpful to use them as a resource. Don't be afraid to do that. But it's been very, very helpful to me. And also thing you need to do, especially since you're not meeting face-to-face, is set up some type of expectation. I'll talk with individual staff members one-to-one and your team and saying, okay, what are your expectations? What things need to get done? How can I help you? How can I assist you? And it's very easy to get sidetracked with all the things that are going on around you, especially with what's going on with the COVID-19. But the most important too is that they understand that what the expectations are. And it doesn't change because they're working remotely. Actually, it becomes more effective. What I'm finding out too is that since there's things that you're not doing on a day-to-day basis if you were in the office, I'm finding a lot of our staff members working on file management. You have all these folders you have that you save documents in, and sometimes they're not as organized. Sometimes you just throw things in there. Now that may be this opportunity to go through manage your folders and file management, take care of that. So there's many options, many opportunities. But the most important thing you can be as a team leader is be accessible. You know, at any time when a team member wants to get in contact you, feel free, you know, to reach out to them and let them know that, hey, or if they reach out to you, feel free to do it, but do it quickly. I'm finding out, for example, I'm not used to using Teams. And I had this team message that went out, and all of a sudden I look at it an hour later and go, oops, you know, I forgot to do that. So make sure you stay engaged with what's going on and use the technology to your advantage. So I can go on and on. There's a lot of information out there that's for us to talk about. So at this point, I guess it's time we open up for Q&A. So Aaron, anything you want to start with?
Yeah, I actually had a question that I was thinking about while you were talking. In addition to all the communication channels like, you know, Slack and Zoom and just the ability to connect with everyone, do you have any recommendations either on tools or best practices for project management? I know that that's something people have been struggling with a little bit, going from, you know, in-person face-to-face meetings to now everyone just kind of floating off on their own. And how are you keeping track of who's working on what?
Actually, we use Zoom as far as the communication piece of it, and then just report back. You know, okay, you're working on this thing to work with these chapters. Okay, what are you doing about that? Then you return and set up. Okay, talk to me at 9 o'clock tomorrow about this. I know there's Microsoft projects out there, and I've been using that as a tool. But those friends I've had that have used that as a very good way to communicate status of projects. But I don't use that personally, so I can't give you an authority on that. But what we've been doing is basically having like a return and report. Okay, this is what everybody's working on. Does everybody know their assignments? And then we're using Teams to kind of give status updates. Because, for example, one of the marketing teams says, okay, I did this, so you guys can do this. And what I found out is that it's a very like a revolving communication, and that's been the key for us in that way. There's other best practices, but that's what we're using, and it seemed to work out very, very well. Because sometimes things that you're working on, a person can't continue on unless you finish your part of the project. And that's what we've done has been very successful for us.
Makes sense. Good question from Leslie here too about where the line between communication and over communication is. And that's something I've heard as well of, everyone's talking to their friends and family a lot more now, and you're talking to work colleagues on Zoom all the time, and sort of where do you draw the line?
What I found, it's hard, for example, I'm sorry to refer back to Pyra, but that's where my experience is right now, is basically sometimes we like to lighten up the mode. So we have like little chats that you do it. And if it has nothing to do with a business related thing, we set up a separate chat to talk about that. For example, there are some funny things that are going around, some funny things, for example, little cartoons that talk about what's going on and things like that. That may be part of the day-to-day business environment. We set up separate chats to talk about that. But with our staff, we're very transparent, for lack of a better word. And someone will say something, okay, we're done. Let's move on. I think we've killed this pretty well. And the key element is that don't be afraid for that kind of honest discussion. And fortunately, our staff is of 11. We're very open to each other, and we know each other fairly well. So that's kind of a benefit for us. Even though I've been only on the staff for 3 months, I was a volunteer leader for 30 years. So they know me. And so I can talk very honestly and transparent as they can to me. And so what I find out is that don't be afraid to say something about it if you feel it's being over communicated. And everybody's good with that. It's actually, I feel like, and to be honest with you, when I was talking to my executive director, I know I mentioned this in our pre-meeting, says, I see more of him than I see my wife, because we're talking so often. But what I find out, he goes, he knows when to draw a line. This quiet time that we're talking about is critical. You need to have that quiet time. And people, if I don't respond to something, they know that it's my quiet time. And or if it's after 5:30 or whatever it may be, they understand that if it's an urgent, and that they'll call me. If it's that critical. But with what we're doing, nothing I don't think is that urgent that we can't wait till next morning to talk about. That's we're in the middle of a webinar and it's going crazy. That's a different animal, but still, but the immediate needs are fine. But as long as you have an open communication line with your team and let them know that, okay, you cross the line as far as communicating, it usually makes it the simplest.
That makes sense. And we've definitely done some of those things at CNM in the last week of setting up like a happy channel on our Slack, just for positive things, sharing pictures of your pets as coworkers kind of thing.
Exactly. It's weird. We've had some interesting cartoons come through, and I got one this morning from our staff, and about stay at home but go shop. Right, whatever. That's kind of a conflicting thing. Yeah. Things like that. So. Anyway.
On that note too, how do you think about prioritizing different communication platforms? Because there's so many ways that everybody can get in touch now of, everyone's on Slack, but you're texting with some people and then they send an email about this, and there's so many different kind of simultaneous channels.
The key is to focus on right up front in the very, very beginning goes, this is this area where we want to communicate the most. And usually it's via Teams. For us, it's the Teams. We go anyways. But if it's like you can't email documents via Teams, but you can say, hey, I've sent an email to you. Go check it out. You got to set up the primary platform for how you want to communicate on an ongoing basis and stick to it. And if someone goes off, it's like what you talked about before with our communicating. Hey, Raphael, no, go back to this, and those kind of things and it's been real helpful for us because there's so many things that you can communicate with, a lot of platforms out there, but you got to stick to the platform that you as a team designate that you're going to use on an ongoing basis. And that could change, but if it's still working, then why change?
That makes sense. Any other remote management questions for Wayne while we're on the topic. Another minute or two, anything in the chat? I think we've gone through most everything so far. All right. Let's shift gears then, shall we? And we will switch into scenario planning mode with our very own Maura Harrington. You want to take it away, Maura? Still not hearing you. Are you dialed in on the phone? You might need to switch things around a little bit. You might need to redial in, I think, because I'm not hearing you still. So we might switch gears and have Leslie go over fund development while Maura gets your audio working. Does that sound all right? You ready, Leslie? Sorry to put you on the spot there.
No problem. How's everybody doing this morning? Nice to see a lot of people, a lot of different names too, and people that I want to see more faces so I can see who you are. Anyway, well, today we're talking a little bit about fund development, and I always think that, I mean, and that's where we know we're getting a lot of concern, that people are concerned. They feel their money's at risk. They, concerned, well, they're going to pay people. How are they going to do it? It's interesting is I think some of it depends on where you were a month ago to how you're feeling now. It does make a difference in feeling your security. But what, as I've been doing, talking to people and otherwise realizing what some of the best practices are, is first thing is you need to do is calm down, relax. We've only been in this 2 weeks. We don't know we're still in an unknown area. So it's important to kind of take a stock and kind of, take a breath before we get really scared and go in all different directions, because going in all different directions isn't going to get you where you need to be. The second is really assess really what's going on. What's the impact to you? What is the impact? Yes, on the service delivery side and on the expense side, what's going to be realistic? What are you going to be needing? Where are you going to be expanding? What's going to get hit? What's going to have greater need and less? But also on the revenue side, really look at your sources and look at all of them and determine what is their risk. What is the risk of each source of money, and what can you expect, and how is it going to fit in? So if you look at just one of it, yes, if you're getting, foundation money, okay, you get it, you're going to figure out with the foundations and what that's going to mean. If you're looking at government money, okay, that's a big chunk, and so far we don't know what government's doing. If you're getting money from fee-for-service, if you're getting money for individuals, look at it and look at your risk in each area and be realistic. Don't make assumptions. Don't assume that anything particularly is going to happen. The stock market's going down. It doesn't mean that people are going to stop giving immediately. We know foundations work on a 3-year rolling average, so they don't immediately hit. It's going to hit in other times, but don't assume what anybody's going to do. And in that, really look at, as I said, look at the risk of each situation. And then the next is really about engaging. Engage all of your key people. Number one is, I assume everybody's engaged their board. Your board has to be part of whatever's going on and partners in it. Engage your staff and letting know. Engage other people that you need to. It's really important that you're not feeling this alone, that it is part of a team effort, as it always should be. The next is that, as Wayne talked about, the importance of communication. In any way, that's a really important piece of, as you're assessing and gathering information, find out what's real. Communicate with your foundations that you're getting funded with and see what is their strategy at this point. Do they know their strategy? Do they know if you're going to be able to use the money for something else, or do they know what's going on? Let them know you're there. Let them know what your situation is. But communicate. You don't have to be knocking on the door and go, help, we're running out of money today. But, just be able to understand and build that line of communication. Same as with, they're moving quickly and days are changing. So what they were doing last week, they may not be doing next week. So keep track of them. Keep track of what, be on their radar in a way that's real. And it's also what you're communicating. Important to let them know if you're on the front line, what you're doing is important. Or if you're a food place right now, if you're dealing with domestic violence and you're seeing it increasing, remind them that that's what's going on with you, so they have that in mind. But also communication, and with all different sources. If you've got corporate money coming in because you had an event going on and you've canceled the event, talk to the corporate funders. Find out, listen, we had this plan. We're not doing the event. Can we still count on you? Find out what's going on. Or is there another way we can do something to secure that money? It's that finding out from the government. And we know they're in the same way. They're changing. They're not pulling back money as of yet. And we know they're not going to do that. We don't know what they're doing in emergency response. Get on their radar to say, listen, when you got it down, we want to just be on that part of it. How can we keep up to it? We don't need to be bugging you every day, but talk to them. What are they thinking about? Give them information about you. As well as, that's what I would say with donors. It's really important to be communicating with people. And in that sense of talking to them as well as listening to them, find out what is going on with them. And if what's going on risk or how they're feeling or what's happening, let them know what you're doing. It's really important to keep that communication up. In that same way, watch your message. You can only yell we're in a disaster, we're falling apart so many times. We're at risk so many times is the only you got to choose how you're doing it and when you're doing it. In the same part, this is a good time to be doing your research and really thinking strategically. This is a good time to build your case information, to really kind of keep what you need to do, gather stories. This is the time to do that. You have the cases to do. This is the time to really prepare material that you need to. And this is the same time as in the communication, this is the time to be researching about people and learning about what's going on in what they're doing. It's really important to be out there. It's also really important to not stop raising money. Keep going. If you're at a capital campaign, keep moving. You can still talk to people. You don't have to close the gift today, but you don't want to not communicate. You want to stay with it. You don't know what's at risk for them. If other people are still giving, they may be giving to different things. Yes, some people are more at risk. Other people are making changes. Also, people are deciding to give to other things. I may be giving to one thing, but I'm saying, I'm going to give to food today because they need it or homeless. There's things on the front page. Don't assume that people aren't giving. Even people that are laid off, you have to assume what they're doing. They may be stopping, so you just have to honor that. But the idea is to really think about it. But I guess I would go back to saying is that really look at your sources, look at it, and and think strategically. Don't start running in all different directions. If you're sending out a mailer, think about it. Wait, what do you want these people to know? Do you have a case right now that's really important? Do you have an issue right now that's really important? Not all organizations are in trouble right now or don't perceive themselves going to be. Is it okay? So you want to keep them on your mailing list. You want to keep them connected. Or you want to also find out, about people's things. So it's really important to kind of keep those avenues open. And so what's going on and you can then gauge it and you can work on it in pieces in that way. That's probably what, the biggest thing we're seeing. There are individual things about, how to deal with events or stuff. Yes, people are canceling them now and you have to, but don't cancel out to the whole end of the year if you don't have to yet. Take it as it comes. See if you can translate it to something else. We don't know where people are going to be. And yes, and as I was thinking about fundraising, I was talking to them, this is even going to get a whole other thing is because we're probably heading into a recession. But in that same way, keeping connection and engaging and communicating is going to set you up better for whatever is going to be ahead for us. So any questions?
Yeah, got one in the chat, but also one that came in before the call that I wanted to get to, which is just kind of what are we hearing from the funders community right now? I know that we're in touch with a lot of funders and just kind of curious what their sense is on the situation right now.
And I'm going to actually kick that over to Regina. Can we turn Hi, everybody. It's interesting. A few things. I'm going to start with one question that I think Leslie started to tee up, which is what people are doing in new ways to raise money given this funny time that we're in. And I know that, over the last 10 days or so, what I've seen is some organizations kind of going virtual and saying, we're not doing the gala, but fund us anyway. Pretend you're buying the table or buy those 2 tickets because we're now going to convert those dollars to some other need that's emerged over the last 2 weeks. So that whole idea of communicating with your donors But in terms of what the funders are doing, I've seen an extraordinary response over the last 10 days. And I just did a blog this morning about it, because what I'm seeing both on the corporate side and on the private philanthropy side is a very fast, rapid response that says, and hopefully you guys are getting these emails from your grant makers saying, we'll work with you on, moving program support to general operating support, relieving some of the deadlines for reporting, extending deadlines to do the work. The one thing that I would recommend is call your funders and tell them what's happening and offer up some ideas on what you want to do with that money. I've seen extraordinary generosity over the last 10 days. They're trying to be as respectful as they can be, that you're all on the front lines and figuring out how to serve your neighborhoods and what to do if you're not going to be reimbursed for services. You're also probably dealing with what you're doing with your staff. If you're going to be furloughing, laying off, trying to make those pennies go further. I think the trend right now is for every philanthropy, from the national ones to the local ones to the family ones. What I'm seeing is everyone's trying to figure out ways to be most helpful and the least cumbersome. So I would communicate, and I think there's a lot to negotiate. If you have a plan and you have a need, I'd call them and ask. I think you're going to get a positive response.
And I'd probably say that too. That's for any of your donors, in the same sense. If they've given to you something before, go back, tell them what's going on, and they have capacity there. As I was talking to someone, they said, one of our donors lost $2 million. Well, you know what? If they have $2 million, if they lost $2 million, that's just a piece of what they have. So they probably were philanthropic, and they're not going to stop. So
I would add, Leslie, to that point, that I think, one of the things that we heard from our PR experts over the last week is, let's also recognize that people are losing their jobs.
Oh, yeah.
The stock market did go down. People are worried about their health. There's just an environment where there's just a lot of anxiety. That's not news to any of you. But if you're going to communicate, there's an opportunity to say that, that we know these are very anxious times, and that some of the issues that, you're dealing with your nonprofit, will go on. And then if that means that, they have the ability to give, and if they're grateful to have a job, they're stepping up. We saw it during the recession, and we're seeing it right now. We just know everybody's really cautious because we don't know how long and how deep and how hard it's going to be. But the counterintuitive data point is that, nonprofits historically do better in bad times. People get fat and happy during good times, and they forget about us. So, if you can be careful about your message that doesn't ignore the obvious environment that we're in, there's an opportunity to just be consistent, right? I think that's what we heard on the HR side as well, which is, we know that we have to over communicate with our staff, right? That right now we're going to be spending a lot more time looking at screens. But we also know that as leaders, we can create order in a really chaotic time. So the more we can clarify expectation, the more we can understand that there's a lot of distraction. And the more that we can say, like you were saying, Wayne, we're checking in every morning at 9. We're going to have quiet time from 11 to 12, that we might do something fun. I know Pyra's doing a happy hour, to have their staff check in. One of the things that I think is on our website is a source that Deloitte is sharing with their partners around the world to say, there are methods for managing remotely that are working really well. And the other thing is, it's an opportunity to take a look at what we might learn right now that we can use later, that we wouldn't have tried if we didn't have to, and we're finding out there's opportunities. So some of this might be a chance to say, are we learning new ways of doing business that might end up benefiting us when we get through this,
One question that came in on the chat is about the House bill that just was passed for small businesses. I know it like just happened, but curious if either you or Leslie have any details on how it might affect nonprofits.
All I know is that over the last week, everyone that we could communicate to, we were saying, remember the nonprofit sector, and they did. I don't know yet, but we'll get that up on our website, how to make sure that you get information about how to apply, what's accessible. I know both at the state level and at the federal level, there are dollars available. The other thing that you should know on the unemployment side is they're being as flexible as they can be about short-term unemployment and furloughs, and helping if you're having to reduce your workforce right now, how those dollars are available. I also know that during the week of April 6th, we will be doing a series of webinars totally focused on money that's coming online. So over the next week, the reason why we're not doing it next week is because we want to make sure that we collect as much information as we can, and then make sure that you can click to get to apply to whatever you can. And we'll be doing that within the next week. So stand by on that.
Sounds good. I've also heard from a few people that Cal Nonprofits also has a bit more detailed information on their website, and I just posted their link into the chat.
Makes sense. That's great.
Another question before we move on is from Judith. As a consultant, what is the best way to assure that clients keep going with development plans in these times?
You know, I think it's one of the things you've got to be really doing is reassuring them. You've got to be the person to kind of center them and bring them down to what's important and help them put this in their priorities. And as a consultant working with clients right now, we know this. They're going in all different directions, and some of the things aren't, and they're not going to the things that they're not as comfortable with. It's really kind of sitting down with them and figuring out, okay, what can we do now? What do we have to put off? What can we move up? You know, it's really kind of sitting in and helping them, and that's why helping them even go out and talk to their donors or whoever their funders are, because it's going to help them understand they can move ahead, and they don't have, as I said, they don't have to be going out and asking for money. They're going out and talking to them. So help them calm down and work with them and help them think about what's going on. Also, this is the time to then be out there telling people what your story is, what's going on, how this is impacting you as an organization. You know, it depends on what your organization is. If you're on the front lines, this is the time to people know, you know what, in this time, domestic violence is going up, and this is what we see now, and this is what we anticipate. Let them focus on their mission but also kind of use a way to communicate with people and to try to stay focused.
Awesome. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, you know, one of the things that
Thank
I've
you.
noticed this week, thanks, Erin, to Leslie's point, is I think consultants have an extraordinary role right now because you're outside of the environment. And I think that, I believe that the further we get away from the shock of what, you know, working and living in place and moving your employees remotely and setting up systems, I think that in the weeks ahead, we're going to move from how do we respond to the daily tsunami of information to how do we move toward recovery. And I think that consultants, our consultants at CNM and the independent consultants that are around the region can help people start to think when they have some brain space available about what the recovery phase is going to look like. I just would add the caveat that, you know, I work with a lot of CEOs, and, you know, I think that it's emotionally taking a toll. It's physically taking a toll. And so for consultants that can say, ready to talk about, and when are you going to be ready to think about the recovery phase versus, I keep telling everyone, think about it in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We have to get through the first ones first, and then we can move into the longer term thinking. And we just have to be sensitive to that. But I do believe consultants have an extraordinary role to play throughout 2020 as people look at all the changing data points, and then where are there some opportunities?
And add to that too, I think as consultants, we're an outside ear for them. We may be going outside of our specific bandwidth, whatever we're working with them on, it might be something else. If I'm working with them on strategic planning, they need other help now. They need other thinking. They need thought partners. And our role is, I think, to be there to help them with whatever they're thinking about. And they may not, if you sit, we talk about, they may get off task for a while. That's okay. Be there with them, because when they're ready to come back on, you're there with them. And that's about the partnership. And that's what I think. They may not have somebody inside they can talk to, and I know Regina talks about this a lot, is that they don't know who they can go to. You may be that ear that can help them through this. So it's important to see yourself more than just their consultant, but their partner.
Absolutely. Well, let's switch gears to our last topic of scenario planning with Maura, which I think was our most requested topic, as I know everyone's considering alternate scenarios. So no pressure, Maura, but I think we got our audio working now.
Okay, can you hear me? Yay,
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Thank you all, and thank you, Wayne. I know that one of the things that I got the other day was a text that told me I got a Slack to inform me of an email. So we're struggling as well on how to prioritize, so I appreciate that. So many things have come up, but I thought I'd really start with, like, when we got questions, and as we are still getting questions about scenario planning, let me just tell you what they look like. And by those of you who I can see, you can nod or not. First of all, I keep hearing, how can we plan when everything is so unclear? You know, how can we plan when we don't know what we can control? So we'll look at that. Others are saying, like, can we manage risk? You know, will this planning absolutely help us do that? You know, is it the same as building contingency plans? You know, what in the world is scenario planning, and why is my board asking me to do this? And I need to do other things. And then another thing that came up a couple times is, you know, we are so busy putting out fires. How can we stop and plan? And so I think a lot of these intersect with some of the things that have come up about constant communication. Regina talked about people are, you know, sort of running at high gear, and we're going to be seeing some, you know, some of that kind of ebb and flow. So first I wanted to start off and say, like, what is scenario planning? First, it's not contingency planning only. Contingency planning tends to be a one variable, what if? What if we don't get that grant? What if clients don't come, or things like that? So in contrast, scenario planning looks at a number of factors, but also looks over time. And Regina made a reference to that. You know, we sort of have to kind of deal with what's in front of us now, meet those needs, and move forward. And it really is a discipline method, you know, to have the opportunity to look at a number of different possible futures that you can imagine, but you know, laying data over that. So it's not just visioning, but it's kind of putting some things right there. And it's not the same as some of the, you know, things that might be sensitivity analysis or that kind of thing. But it allows you to present a base case and move off of that. And I'll talk in a moment about what that looks like. We're hoping, you know, in best case scenarios, you know, using that word again, it can help simplify. I think right now we are all dealing with so much data and so much information, and on that flip side, a lack of data. So, you know, how to be able to set up some frames with that. And what it's designed to do, and I believe it does, is that it can help us not be overconfident and also not underconfident, as well as not being tunnel visioned. And so I will push against some of the things that have been said before. It is about money, but it's about more. So, and the fund development is one thing, and so it's a little more broad ranged. So most of you already do some form of scenario planning. You maybe have not labeled it as such. We at the center see nonprofits using scenario planning in various ways already, whether it's part of strategic planning for the organization, whether it's about program planning, or just in some of the fiscal projections. So it's likely that you may have done some of this, so it's not completely foreign, but it does have some different roles. Let me just move a little quickly to what does it look like? So there's really about 4 steps, and I think Erin mentioned that we'll be sending you out some things after this. But the first thing is you really have to assess and understand what's going to stabilize you now. This has totally rocked our boats, and, you know, how do we figure out what's going to, you know, what we can figure out is the same. And so within that, though, we're really trying to figure out, you know, we've been sort of perched, and I guess really the word is clenched, about what's going to really happen. And that stage is sort of awaiting the impact. the news every day and trying to figure out when the surge is going to come and, when the Senate is going to pass the bill and when the House is and all of those things. And so we're trying to get that normalcy of being locked in our own rooms and seeing how we can amend some of our business practices. Then it's, as we move on and it's kind of concurrent, how are we withstanding this new impact? Where have things really been bumpy, whether it's communication, funding, or, some of the organizations we know have a really hard time reaching their clients in this virtual world. So looking at that. And then, typically in the verbiage of this kind of modeling, we have this return to normal, but, I think we have to change that. I don't know what normal is going to be. None of us know what normal is going to be, but, sort of once, we get back to business or whatever we're calling it, and we ease back into a different, things will start to pick up, but we know that as organizations, things may continue to change, or we may have learned some things. And then there's this other, external look, not just only looking internally at our own practices, but thinking about how is the sector changing? How are the other sectors changing? And what is that going to do? Leslie made a lot of references about how funders are really, moving to change to some more general operating, trying to help, look at some of the things that they're trying to do. And so, what will that mean in the short term and in the long term? And at the same time, one of the things that I think we're really good at in the nonprofit world is looking at what are the challenges and risks. Where do we have vulnerabilities that are different? Some of you may have just come off strategic planning. So, oh, we had it. We did our SWOT, and we did design some strategies, but there may be some new risks that are coming up. And then also the other thing, which kind of makes me laugh, is like, where can you be flexible? Here, thank you all for moving me around to the end because my audio didn't work for some reason. So, where can we kind of have those kinds of flexibilities internally with our board and with our funders, as well as with our clients? And so that's some of the complexities we know that we're dealing with. And so after you kind of laying out some of those risks and really, and has to be as dispassionate as possible, thinking about risks in terms of money, external, but also our staffing and the way work is going to be. Then you have the opportunity to say what might some of the options be. And this is something that I'm going to talk about in a minute, but, in this kind of model is, how do we lay that out? What kind of opportunities might that afford us? And what are the pros and cons of all? And then, finally, building scenarios. And the two things I want to say about this, many of you know, most of our models are usually some sort of matrix, right? Looking at different variables against each other. Scenario planning is very much like that, where we have to really think externally at what's out of our control. We don't know right now if we're going to be, on I don't know how to call it, lockdown, isolation, whatever, for 2 months, 4 months, or more. But we can at least start to project what that might do and what that might be. So it's kind of setting that up. And as we obtain more information, we can refine that. And then internally having something that says, what do we need to think about short term? And then define midterm, which may be 2 months, and then a little longer. I think one of the things that, we're really very focused on is right now part of this is crisis management. So it's about trying to deal with that, which is money, structure, and our people, and at the same time trying to be strategic, which are a little bit counterintuitive. So trying to look at that. And so in terms of, what do we need to focus on, both the short term and the long term, I mentioned the risks, but, I'm curious too, and Regina alluded to this, these kinds of times allow us to do something that may be more bold or courageous or risky than we might have done before, because now we may not have a choice, or we can say, we can move on something different, whether it's our approach, how we staff, the work we do, things like that. While planning focuses on money, I just want to, make sure that we don't forget the other M's, which is our mission and the management of our staff. And that, in this scenario planning, it is definitely, I'm not saying it's not about cash, it is about cash, but it's also about what are some of the intended and unintended impacts that might have on our services, on our relationships, and on our staff and our productivity. So looking at that. And one of the last things I'll say is that scenarios really need to be based, sort of in a expected, whether it's 2 quarters, 1 quarter, a year, but don't, have the crisis plan for now and then also moving on. We'll share some resources. I know that we have an NFX cash flow for scenario planning, and we're going to put up some things that broaden it. But I'll stop there. You know, most of you who know me, I talk forever, so I'll stop there for any questions.
Awesome. Yeah, I got a couple of questions that have to do a little bit with kind of staffing in this crazy time. One of them is, you know, they recently extended an offer to somebody for an executive position within the organization. Are you able to postpone the start date until a later time? How do you handle something like that?
You know, I might actually flip this to Wayne a little bit. That's somewhat, it may be a legal issue if you've signed a contract or not. Because, you know, what are the, again, what are the risks? And then what might you lose in terms of having that person come on? Thanks, Wayne.
My first disclaimer is I'm not a lawyer. Second thing is that if a contract is signed, you know, there's no reason why that person cannot work remotely, if that's possible. But to my understanding, and I haven't had too many scenarios like this, but I would work with the person that you hired and signed a contract with. The flexibility, I believe, is there. But it's on a case-by-case basis. You have to find out, okay, your start date is this time, but can we move it back to whatever? But the problem with that is that you don't know when that whenever is going to be. So the opportunity, what we've been doing is basically with some of the clients I work with is for example, they need a computer or whatever, and they can work remotely. We send them their equipment, they can begin working remotely until further notice.
Gotcha. Thank you. Sorry, a few more questions coming in. What about a short-term move to reduce hourly and exempt staff hours? Is this recommended as we go into this planning mode? Just kind of the staff side of things of scenario planning.
I'll start and then hand it to it. Yeah, I think. Okay. Go ahead. I was just going to say, as part of some of those risks and opportunities, absolutely, we just want to be mindful that reduction of short-term costs could undermine the actual ability to deliver on previous contracts or services that grants have funded or others have done. So it has to be sort of, you know, we do know, as Regina mentioned, that the new laws are allowing for different ways to access federal funds to support staff, so that's also a consideration. But I know, Wayne, you're ready to jump in.
Well, it's kind of something that Aaron and I have been talking about a little bit about the Workshare program that EDD offers for reduction hours. Employees can use that, and employers actually, they can use that benefit for them to file for the unemployment and they'll get whatever they don't work, they can get that in balance as far as their to make them not make them whole, but almost whole. So. And we can share a link where the EDD website is, and it's very, very self-explanatory, and it's actually very well put together. So.
And what I heard actually on another is that, especially on EDD, monitor the website. Whatever's true today might be different tomorrow. So
every day. Yeah.
So whatever you do, check it and keep checking it and test your assumptions and then follow up on it, because it's going to be different.
Very true. Thank you, Leslie.
I just wanted to let you all know that PIRA has a briefing webinar every Monday, and part of their partnership with us, it allows all of you to be on that webinar on Mondays. It's a regular standing opportunity to get updates on what's happening with HR. We know it's one of the big topics that you're juggling right now, and that's one resource. The other one is we have some partners that we work with that we're hoping to make available for office hours to respond to your questions as fast as we can put it together. So, but I would say take advantage of the PIRA call on Monday, and we can make sure we put that on our website so you have access.
Thanks for the plug, Regina. Thank you.
The only thing I would add, I know that a lot of my colleagues have been asking me about that kind of reduction in force strategy as a way to get through a couple of months. It's just going to be really important that you know what, sort of the HR parameters are. You need to give them notice. You need to communicate clearly. And then you need to be ready for some of the anxiety that comes from all of that. So anything that you can do to talk to people. There's the other thing that occurred to me that I don't know how this is going to work, except that it kind of crosses all of the topics that we talked about so far today. And that is that, you know, there's also an opportunity to partner. You know, I had an organization call me the other day saying that they had some extra staff that can't remember what they know how to do, but they thought that they might be able to make it available to some of their colleagues that were under siege and being extra burdened right now with work. And, you know, just connected two organizations to talk about how they could maybe help each other and avoid that reduction in staffing short term. So I would consider, as Maura was saying about your scenarios, where there might be partners. I really think there's going to be an opportunity for the rest of them to think about that and then jump on it. And I think philanthropy would be very supportive.
And also, when you're thinking about reductions, think about what your financial costs are. If you're gonna lay somebody off, or if you're gonna give them a leave of absence, or what that means. You know, if you're laying them off, then you've got their vacation to pay out, and then they don't have benefits. And so there's different options of how you can do it now, and think it through so you know what the impact is to you, and will also to them, to get the best, to be able to be the most effective in moving ahead. Makes sense.
And we'll ask if I was going to say, we'll ask if Pyra has a checklist or something like that too. So as as one of our leading experts, we'll see what we can provide.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll be sure to share that link to the Monday Pyra call in a follow-up email, and we'll add it to our resource page as well. In the last 10 minutes or so, curious if you've got other questions not related to the topics that were covered today, including anything that you'd want us to cover in future Lunch and Learns. It's something we're looking at. So would love any other open questions you've got now on any topic, including anything that you would love us to cover in the future. And while we're waiting for some of those to come in, curious, Maura, last scenario planning question that had come in advance on just tools, templates to help scenario planning. I know we've got one that we've linked to on our page that I can share a link to now from Nonprofit Finance Fund that had some good spreadsheet templates that you can get started on. But curious if you've got any others that you can talk about.
Yeah. Trying to look at what we can add to that. I mean, that one is very cash oriented, as I mentioned, and they have a great cash flow worksheet that Erin is mentioning. We're going to put up a couple things that we have found that we think are helpful, that help you look at a few questions and look at some of those variables I talked about how to look at the macro and the micro at the same time. So yeah, I can say it won't be today, but we will do it next week.
Awesome. Not seeing any other questions bubbling up. You got another couple of minutes while we're here, but yeah.
I just wanted to add to, especially when we think about the HR things, so this is Wayne's, is that check your sources. On most things now, there is so much information out there. There is so much information flying that if you hear something, don't assume it's correct unless you know what the source is, and check it. I know that's kind of the obvious, but the rumor mill is out there, and that's, I think, with even that is with funding or with any of it, we're hearing, you know, some person says this money's getting cut, or this money's doing this, or this is happening, and all of a sudden we start getting concerned. Find out, check it out, look at multiple sources, because there's just so much incorrect information out there along with the real information.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it, Mary.
So this is my first Lunch and Learn. And I've been a chief development officer for less than a month. I was an executive director, and I've split my job. So now I get to focus on this. I'm super excited. There are so many groups and so many meetings and so many things going on. And so I was wondering if people in the group could give me some insight as to what would be the best use of my time as far as meetings and webinars and et cetera, or at least the ones to start with.
That is a great question. Maura, Leslie, Regina, any thoughts on how to prioritize the flow of information right now?
I'm a little biased, but what I found out, and as I talked with the CNM team, is that a lot of times, like Leslie talked about, is make sure your resources are viable. I know with Pyra, they go through extensive research and do the resource. Anything that's posted on their website usually comes from a lawyer or something like that. And so I suggest, if you go to the power.org website, that there's a link that has to do, like you guys had, the CNM has with their resources that are there. And we have a little more time to read, it seems like. And so I'm going through a lot of stuff to read, and not to plug, but I guess I kind of, and I apologize if I'm doing this out of context, but we're offering a 70-day membership or to the end of May to all people that want to look into our organization as far as a resource. Another one for you, Mary, is that, you have till the end of May to check it out. If you don't like it, then you're done. If you like it, then you pay whatever the fee is and then move forward. But there's a lot of organizations out there that are doing the same thing. But I think we're one of the only associations that's offering the free membership to the end of May. And so it's
say the name. I'm sorry, Wayne. Say the name again of that organization.
PIHRA, PIHRA.org.
And I know
It's on the chat. Yeah.
It's on the chat. Yeah.
Same thing is that other. Am I on? Is all professional organizations. I think that's important to look at. I know AFP is doing stuff. Start with those organizations. And we know a lot of people are out there, and a lot of people have got a lot of good information, but a lot of people are out there trying to, listen, for the consultants there, we also know this is business development time. And so find out when you're getting information, or you're getting a information plus a sale, which is fine. Everybody can do that stuff, but I would stick with organizations as a starting place and see where they're leading you. We can talk further, Mary, if you want to check in and kind of figure out what those sources are.
Great, thank you, Leslie.
Erin, to your earlier point, selfishly, like Wayne, we happen to think that the Center for Nonprofit Management is a good resource. We don't have any other agenda than to try and be an aggregator. I know that there is a lot of information coming at all of us right now, and the only advice that I can give you as a peer and as a friend is don't read everything that you're getting. It's overwhelming. So to Leslie's point, if you're a fund development person, go with what AFP is putting out. If you're looking at what's happening on the policy side, keep an eye on what Cal Nonprofits is putting out. It's the most relevant source. And then stop with the noise, because you're going to have to lead your teams and you're going to have to make decisions. And, everyone's improvising right now. And, I think what I've really seen with the leaders that I'm working with over the last 2 weeks, it's not hard to get overwhelmed. And it's really, really important that we do whatever we can to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of others. Because we are going to get through this window, and our communities are going to be counting on us to get back to work. So the more that we can do to kind of not make ourselves any crazier than necessary right now, I support, which is why we're doing these lunch and learns. We thought, you can spend half an hour, 45 minutes with peers, get some questions answered, have some lunch, and then go back to work. So Erin, I'll turn it back to you.
I was just going to say that I think what we know is that there's a diminishing return on information, and how you work remotely. You hear one webinar, you're going to get 90% of the information, and each one's going to give you a little other, but some of this is going back to your common sense on how you deal with things. And also the fact is use your networks. One of the things is that I think Regina has said a lot is, your networks of people are really helpful in information, and where they're finding out information is part of what's got to be out there, because that's sharing it. And it's a lot of these things too is just going back to basics. What do you do, and how do you deal with it, and how do we deal with it in a crisis? It's important to think about. But at least I find, yep.
Absolutely. I think the only other thing that I'd add to that is, on top of the information gathering of all of this, there's the, feeling of community. There's the, how do you maintain a connection with your peers who are going through the same thing that you're going through? And they're probably doing the same, just, information overload. So one of the things that we're loving about doing this is just being able to, see and connect with all of you, which is great. So thank you all for joining. We're just about at the end of the hour. I was curious, Regina, do you want to wrap it up? Any final words before we head back to work?
I think I just want to say thank you all for being part of this. Send us your questions. We're here. We want to be helpful, and we absolutely understand these are challenging times, and really have to say how inspired we are by all the work that you're doing right now. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you all. We'll wrap it up here. We'll be sure to send a follow-up with any and all resources that were mentioned and a recording of the call. And stay tuned for our next Lunch and Learn next week, where we'll figure out what topic we'll be discussing is what is most relevant. So yes, question, how often are you planning these so we can promote them? We're shooting to do these every Friday moving forward. So plan to keep this time open, and we'll hopefully see you all next week.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you all.
everyone.